Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Vixen Voice. Today, I am chatting with Hayleigh Hayhurst. She is the founder of Espresso Podcast Production. Yep, that's right. We're talking all things podcast today. So it's amazing. Hayleigh has an awesome business. I have been on her podcast, and we had so much fun that I wanted to invite her here so that all of you could hear her. So we're going to kind of dive into her entrepreneurial journey, which started early. So I think this will be interesting. All things about her. And then we're going to chat about podcasting, some of the things that happen behind the scenes that you have no idea of. And also, if you're thinking about a podcast, maybe reasons why you should do it, how difficult it is, etc. Because I don't know what's going on, Hayleigh, but I've literally had 5 people in the last month tell me they're starting a podcast. So you're going to be
I've
busy.
seen a lot of people too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me, April.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited we get to talk about podcasting because I'm nerdy about this, as are you, probably much higher degree than me. But Hayleigh, before we dig in, it is your first time on the Vixen Voice, so I always like to ask, if you could share with us a pivotal moment in your life that's really helped to craft like this amazing woman sitting here with us.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great way to start this conversation. So yes, thank you, April, for having me on. I would say the pivotal moment in my life of starting my business was really back. I graduated in December 2019. And we all know March 2020 was when the pandemic started. And so finding jobs was very difficult. And I was recently out of school and was competing with all of these people who have been in corporate for a while, in companies for a while, had years of out of college experience. All of my experience at the time had been internships. And so it was just it wasn't working out for me to find somewhere that would hire me right out of college. And so what ended up happening was I was laid off. I moved up to Seattle. I'm from Las Vegas originally. I only knew 2 people up here. One of my friends during the pandemic was like, hey, I need a new roommate up in Seattle. And we've been friends since high school. We've been friends for years. Yeah. And she basically convinced me to move up here, and it was a great decision. I love the city, and it really pushed me to a lot of boundaries and limits that I had never experienced before, which led me to starting my business. So I'm sure we'll get into how that all started, but I never thought I would own a business like I do today. It all just happened kind of just like things just were in the right path for me to start Espresso Podcast Production.
Well, I love that because I'm sure at the time it wasn't fun, but what a blessing to have this experience so early in your life where you get to become an entrepreneur sooner rather than later.
Yes.
I really love that. And do you have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs, or what are most of your friends doing?
I don't. And that was one of the biggest things for me when I did start my business, where I didn't have any friends who were entrepreneurs. I have some entrepreneurs in my family. My mom is one. So I think that was a good resource for me to look up to, and probably what led me to starting my business, honestly. Just seeing that's an option. But no, so actually, since it was the pandemic, I didn't know anyone in Seattle. I didn't know any entrepreneurs, and I really leaned into the online space. And of course, my business was podcasting, but I will say podcasting made it so much easier for me to make connections with entrepreneurs. And I wasn't even trying to get sales, right? I was just trying to meet people who were in the same space as me, or maybe could be a resource for me. And podcasting, and honestly, Instagram Lives, back then Instagram Lives were popping. And so I was doing a lot of those, and it was just, that was what led me to just feeling more confident in this space.
Oh, I like it. So We launched this August 17th of last year, our podcast, and here we're recording this on April 11th. Oh, it's 11/11, April 11. So something for two
That's
of
lucky.
us is about to happen for us. Yes. I love it. So yeah, we're, not really a year in, but like at the same time I've been guesting, like how I guested on your podcast. I absolutely love it because I meet so many amazing women, number one, and stay in touch. And number two, every time I either host or guest, I learn something. Sometimes it's an aha I have, sometimes it's something the host or the guest shared. And like, I don't know, it's just, I feel very blessed to be having this experience. Like, it's really wonderful.
Yeah, people are so cool and know so many things. And so I always say, like, I manage podcasts for all different industries, wellness to mindset to bloggers to whatever it is. And the amount of random knowledge that I learned from these that I can then just like tell my friends or like my other clients, I'm like, did you know? And they're like, no, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I have the best clients.
I love it. I know. I love learning from my clients too, and like hearing what they're reading and different things. Like, it's so fascinating. So why podcasting? First of all, let's go back. What was your degree in? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I had a degree in journalism and I did take a lot of audio classes then. And so really my podcast journey started in 2017. That was the first time I was behind a microphone. And it was for this radio class that I was taking. And just being in the studio and having access to like a professional podcasting studio was just like, I had to take advantage of it. So my friend and I actually started a podcast together in college, and just for fun. We never really thought that it would take us anywhere. And she still hosts it to this day. And so we both were learning podcast editing, podcast marketing, how to host a podcast, I remember our first guest, we were like, how do we do this? This was before all these tools were created that make it a lot easier. And so just that experience that was what got me to feeling more confident in podcasting. Yeah. And with the classes as my background, like how to edit video, how to do all of these things. So it was really all taught to me in that. And then, of course, as my business has gone on and things have changed, I've been able to learn more things, but my background in journalism really was the base to this whole journey.
I love that. Yeah, when you talk about your first guest, I remember I recorded 3 the first day we were recording, and like,
oh my gosh,
really great guests. Like, and one had been like a reporter on CNN. Like, she was a journalist, like a career journalist with an Emmy Award. And I'm like, oh, this is who I'm interviewing, like my first day. So I had like a little agenda set out, and I read their bio, and then my podcast production team was like, April, you don't have to be so formal. Like, just talk. But like, for me, it's like I have a guest giving up their time and I want it to be valuable for them and something they enjoy. And that's why I was so prepared. And, now I joke I come with like maybe a note card but I'm blessed, just like you, like with you, I usually know my guests that are coming on. It's rare. There are people applying. So, and then we'll vet them. So I pretty well know the guests coming on. So I don't really have to do a lot of research. And I really value the free flow of conversation because you never know what's going to come up. And I feel like when you plan it so much, you miss those magic moments. But I'm curious, what do you coach your clients to do? Like, what format seems to work the best these days?
Yeah, so there's really 2 types of interviews that you can do for podcasting. One is what you were just talking about, conversational. And then one is more question and answer type of style. So I've had clients who do both. My personal favorite is conversational because you never know what's going to come up. And like we were just saying, like, people are so cool and know so many different things. Yes. And just being able to just dive in deeper on a certain topic is very fun. being able to dive in deeper to, you know, their backstory or what they do, like anything like that. I think having that free form is a lot better for conversations in the entrepreneurial space or in certain industries. So coaches, you know, lifestyle, anything that is, you know, more personality based and we want to show off who we are to the listeners, that's where that conversation is better. I would say in more corporate businesses or any more structured businesses like finance, legal, that's where maybe you don't want the conversation to go off on a tangent because I'm sure you have a certain, I think the beauty with podcasting is it can be just to entertain people and teach them through conversation, or it can be like, listen to this. This is your answer to how to set up your 401k, or here's how you can do this. And so there's those two type of interviews, and both are powerful in different ways. But like I was saying, I love conversational ones.
I do too, but I love that you made that distinction because I personally hadn't thought about it, but having been a financial advisor with a TV show and who did live TV, you can't be free flowing because you're highly regulated in what you can say and can't say to a broad audience, right? So understanding that there are certain guests that come on that are limited in what they could say. And in fact, that's one reason I wanted to have a podcast in my new career as a coach and consultant, because I was like, I want to be free to talk about anything I want. And so I think that's why I don't like to control the conversation. I like to go with it. And in fact, the deeper the guests are, it stretches me because I really want to listen and make it a good conversation. So I actually really enjoy when I'm getting stretched by the conversation and maybe it's a little uncomfortable and I'm like, okay, what do I ask next, right? Or going more free flowing. Yeah.
Totally. I also think about the audience experience as well. What are they coming to you to listen to? And like your podcast, April, they want to come and listen to conversations. But if you were back in your or in your finance days, I'm sure they wouldn't want to hear a conversation about something random. They would want to learn something very, very, very specific from the conversation that you were having. So thinking about it that way, if, you know, you're listening to this and you're like, well, what do I want to do? Question and answer or conversation? I always say, take it back to the listener and think about what they would want to hear.
I love that. And, you know, what you can do and what a lot of hosts do when I guest is, you know, they'll have a set of questions as fallback, but like if we don't get to them, we don't get to them, right? So that way, you know, if you're nervous, if it's the beginning and you don't want to have that awkward moment. And then I don't know if this works or not, but I have this thing. I always like, you know, one time it was a Tony Robbins thing and he said, people like security and they like certainty and they like uncertainty, right? This is why we rewatch movies, because we remember enough that we know what's going to happen or we liked it, but we've forgotten enough that like we're still going to have surprises. So I mean, like the question I asked you at the beginning, I'll ask every new guest. And at the end, I ask the same questions. And I think it's kind of fun to hear that same question from different people because, well, different women, because the important thing is we're all different, but like we're all cool and unique in our own way. And that's part of what I hope the audience takes away, because my goal really is to inspire women to think outside of the box and live the way they want, number one. And number two, to know they're not alone, because there's a lot of times where we don't have freedom to express. And if you hear someone else's story and you're like, wow, I went through that too. Okay, you know, I'm not alone in this. That's so important. And that's why I thank you for sharing like how it was hard to get a job and going out there. And I just want to express to our audience, like, how young you are and you have your own business. And the reason I do this is in my financial firm, you know, then young people were millennials. Now it's shifted. I'm older. I loved hiring millennials because they were tech savvy, they cared, they had purpose, and everyone would like complain about millennials. Now, I mean, you still have to be a good hirer, right? Like you have to hire the right people. But I mean, I remember giving a keynote speech and telling like a room full of financial advisors, actually an auditorium, hire millennials. Like, do not skip over them. They bring a lot of value to the table. And, you know, I know you're younger. My niece is 25 and running a marketing team. I have Bella on my team who's 25 and she's amazing. I would hire 10 of her. Like, I know this doesn't help you a ton. You have your business, but I want to take this moment to say, don't think just because someone's young, they don't bring things to the table, because I love what young free thinkers bring to the table and their passion and how they care. So I want to give you kudos for making this leap. It's super courageous right out of school. And then two, use this moment to remind our listeners that there are good people to hire at all ages, right? Really pay attention to what you're looking for and who. So let's talk about that. So you moved from Vegas to Seattle, where you knew two people. The world was very uncertain at that moment. You're having trouble finding a job. So was it natural to you to make that leap and to start your business, or like, did you have to muster up courage? And my question is, if it's the second one, what did you do to help you muster that courage?
Yeah. So when I moved up here, like I said, I was unemployed. I had all the time in the world, and it was the pandemic. So I was trying to like see what Seattle had to offer, but I really couldn't. Everything was closed. And so I just had a lot of time on my hands. And what actually ended up happening, and why I said in the beginning, like I never expected to start my business, was it was my cousin's cousin. So like I don't know what that is, second, third, whatever cousin. Yeah. She knew I had this podcast in college and reached out to me, and she said, "Hey, I have a podcast. I would like, can you edit it for me? Can you manage it? I don't have the time right now." She was a business coach. She was a personal branding coach. So when everyone was starting their businesses in 2020, she was busy. Just didn't have the time to manage and edit and produce her own podcast. And so she reached out to me, and I was like, "Hey, totally, like, you'll pay me for this? That's crazy. Like, I'm unemployed, so thank you." And I didn't know that that was an actual job, honestly. I did not know that people hired people to run their podcasts. I had no idea. And so I was doing that for, I would say, maybe 2 months, and she was really happy with what I was doing. And since she was very connected in the business space, she was like, "Hey, if you want more clients, like, I know people for you." And that's how my business started. She connected me with people who needed virtual assistant businesses, or like virtual assistants who needed some podcast help, who wanted to be on podcasts. So really, when I started, I was doing a mix of podcast managing and virtual assistants. And it was scary. The first investment I made in my business was a mindset coach, actually, because I was like, I have been a student my whole life. Like, what do you mean I have to figure out how to put myself out there and promote my businesses? You know, I just had someone on my podcast that said her background was in selling products, and when it came to selling herself as the product, there was a lot of barriers that she experienced. And I think that's a perfect way to put it, because being a student versus selling yourself as the product was like a huge shift that I had to make. Yeah. So yes, I hired this mindset coach, and she helped me an unbelievable amount. Like, that investment was worth every single penny. And that was really what got me to where I am. And so after, I would say, probably a year, maybe a year and a half of doing podcast production and virtual assistants, I realized the virtual assistant side was not, I did not love it. I did not love doing like the boring back ends of business or like the support side. And so I took that leap again and went all into podcasting. And that was the only way I was marketing myself. And so I've been doing that since then. And I've been in business for 4 years now.
Awesome. Congratulations. So a couple of things you said. One, I love how you called it an investment in a coach, because it is, and you should get a return on your investment, right?
Yes.
So you want to understand that. And then two, I love how like open you were about, I didn't know how to sell myself and someone was just on your podcast. So I think a ton of my clients struggle with this. And even though I was used to selling myself, when I made the switch from being a financial advisor to a coach consultant, like I just got paid automatically when my clients moved their money over. And as a lawyer, I was billed out hourly, but I didn't do the billing. The billing department did it, right? And so even though I was used to making good money and getting paid well for my services, I had never had to ask someone to, write a check, which no one writes a check anymore, but send the money, pay with credit card, etc. And I had to do work on that for myself. And in fact, I just guested on a podcast, Wine After Work. And Bryce Batts, the host of that, we were sharing stories about this, how it was a challenge for us to start asking people to write us the, check or pay us. So I love that you pointed that out, because there is a transition. Even if you're successful over here and you move to here, there is a transition in different ways. And sometimes blocks come up that you're like, where'd this come from? Why am I struggling with this? Right. And then I do think you have to do mindset or spiritual work or have a coach really that helps you get clarity on that. So I think you're like incredibly wise in a lot of the decisions you made. So I really love that. So let's chat about if someone wants to start a podcast. Because like you said, tons of people want to start. I know tons of people that want to start. And actually, before we go there, you did an interesting post about number of podcasts, how many are active after 1 year, 2 years, etc. So can you just share those numbers with us? Because I know a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, there's millions of podcasts. Why would I start a podcast, right? But I think it's no different than anything. It's that you have to show up consistently and you have to like run the marathon, not the sprint, right? And so, am I correct in like stating that? And, I'd love to hear the numbers and just kind of what you see about staying power for podcast.
Yeah. So podcasting, let me tell you the numbers. I was just pulling this up right here.
Awesome.
So these were shocking to me to see, and I am in this space every day. And so when I posted this, everyone understandably was like, what the heck? And so there are 4.3 million podcasts active, right? Or just started, hosted on any platform. But 44% of those podcasts have less than 3 episodes. And only 700... Yeah. And only 720,000 podcasts have more than 10. So from that 4.3 million to 720,000, only 720,000 of those have more than 10. And then out of those 7,200,000, only 156,000 are releasing weekly episodes. So when you think about starting a podcast, if you are going to be consistent with it, there's really only 156,000 that are truly in the realm of podcasting, right? I know that some people do monthly podcasts, some people do bi-weekly, but if you are starting a weekly podcast, it's not the most competitive thing in the world. And I think that that is crazy to really see, because I think when the pandemic was happening and when there was a big boom in podcasting, which I want to say, I feel like there's one right now, but I'll get into that in a second.
I'd love to hear that.
But when every podcast was really popping up, the joke was always, everyone and their mom has a podcast. Why do you have to start one?
Yes.
And that's what I want to show you is out of 4.3 million, a lot of them might have just posted one episode or posted 2 episodes. And I think the reason a lot of those stop is because they don't see the results right away, which in what industry will you see results after posting one thing?
None. And you're always going to suck at the beginning and you get better.
Exactly. So I think having realistic expectations and goal setting in the beginning is very important for podcasting, because I just hit 100 episodes of my podcast. I think I'm 105 right now.
Congrats.
And thank you. If I was like on day, episode 3, if I was like, I'm not ranking in the podcast charts, or I'm not, interviewing high earning famous people, I'm not successful. But that's not the goal for my podcast. That wasn't what I was looking for. And I have to talk a lot of my clients through that in their first couple episodes where they launch and maybe they don't have the amount of listeners that they were expecting right in the beginning. They have big followings, but they're like, where's the listeners? And I have to go back to be like, it takes time. It takes trust. You have to tell people. A lot of marketing goes into podcasting. There's a lot that goes into it. And like I was just saying, how there was that big boom in podcasting around 2020. I'm seeing one again now, 4 years later, because I think people who just were starting their businesses in 2020 were not ready to take on a podcast, because it does, it takes time. You have to produce it. You have to, it's not a big investment, but it's a big time investment if you're doing it all yourself. And so now I'm seeing these huge coaches who have, huge programs and huge services, like high ticket services, starting their podcasts. I saw 4 last week of just that I follow. And so now is definitely a great time to podcast. Yeah. If you have everything set up in your business and you have that clarity, then it's time. And we could talk all about the goals and what's realistic if you want, but that's all really important for podcasting.
Well, and I feel knowing what you're getting into, like I said, I filmed a TV show for many years and, we'd kind of repeat the episodes and stuff. So it wasn't like I was filming all the time, but I knew once a quarter I was flying somewhere to film the TV show. So I was kind of used to being scheduled. And then when I was on the morning talk show live, I knew once a month I was going into film, right? And I don't think that people go into podcasting with that mindset. And, because what do we start? August. So we're like 8 months in, and I do 2 episodes a week. So we're putting out 8 episodes a month. And, if you don't have that scheduled out, it's going to bite you in the butt and you're going to get caught. So, I just don't think, luckily, and unfortunately, I didn't know you when I launched my podcast, but you and I are talking about marketing and we're going to get that audit done. So I'm serious. I know I reached out to you, but luckily the team helping me, they mainly do production and editing. They said, hey, we want at least 6 episodes before we launch. I think we had 12 episodes done before we launched. And, because of that, until the holidays, I didn't get caught. But I had a friend launch a podcast last week, and then she only had 1 episode, and then she was scrambling to get the next. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're like, the person advising you should have had you prepared, right? Because I wouldn't have known to have like 6 to 12 episodes in the hopper to save, and it's a commitment. I mean, 2 Thursdays a month, all I do is podcast because we're putting out 8 episodes a month. And so I think, talking to someone like Hayleigh or having a coach or a production manager that knows what they're doing is so important, because 1, you need to have realistic goals, and 2, you need to know the commitment you're making. And, when you show me these numbers, I'm not surprised that it drops after 10 episodes, because I think people are like, oh, I can't keep up the schedule, or they haven't organized the rest of their business to maintain that schedule, because, it comes into time, energy, and confidence management. It takes a lot of energy to do a podcast.
It does. My clients average that I save them like 10 hours a month by just taking over their production. And those 10 hours they can then put into marketing their own, their business, running their business. There's a lot that you can do with 10 hours.
Yeah.
So if you have the means to... Sorry,
that's like a solid workday plus. I mean, that's like buying yourself a whole nother workday plus. So I love it. So, okay, Hayleigh, I want to dig into podcasting and what you do. So can we start here again? I've heard so many people that want to start a podcast, and some of them are friends who are like, when I'm out drinking, I have a friend, she's like, when I'm out with my girlfriends, I just interview them and record it, and my husband and I crack up. So I just want to start a podcast doing this. Like, for her, it's totally just fun, which she'll probably skyrocket and be super popular because she doesn't care, right? And then I have friends who want to do it for their business or to promote. So there's so many different reasons. But like, if somebody were like, hey, I'd love to have a podcast and I don't know what to do, what would you tell them like the first steps were?
Yeah. So that's great. And I love that your friend is recording friends when they are just out drinking. That's so funny.
And they're 40 something years old. We're not talking about 20 something year olds. So I think it's going to be hilarious.
Definitely. There's a lot of podcasts that just blow up like that, just friends chatting. So I work in the business space. I work with entrepreneurs, coaches, just anyone who has an online business who wants to use their podcast to grow their business. So the first thing I ask them is why do they want to start their podcast? And you should have a reason, right? You should be able to say, oh, I want to get more clients, or, oh, I want to nurture my audience more, or whatever it is to you. So that's the first question. Why do you want to start it? And then I like to set short-term and long-term goals. So what do you want to see in your first month of podcasting? What guests do you want to have in your first month? And then podcasting is a long game. So what do you want to see in the first year? I think that a lot of people just because there's so many big podcasts out there that are making so much money. And I will say here, it is not the most typical thing to be able to make a high earning profit from your podcast in the beginning. As time goes on, yes, you can get sponsors. Yes, you can get advertisers. Yes, you can monetize your business through your podcast by getting you more clients. But having companies be like, oh, you just started a podcast, here are $10,000. That is going to be very uncalled for. And so just being realistic with that, where it might not make you money in the first couple months, but in the long run, it will bring your business is what I say. So just getting really clear on the goals, your why, and then we can get into strategy after that, but I really want my clients to lay those two out, or any person who wants to start a podcast to lay those out clearly and say, okay, podcasting is a time commitment. I'm going to have to interview, edit, figure out the technical side of things. Is this worth it? And I will say, having had my own podcast and working with hundreds of other podcasters, that yes, it is for your business. It's definitely worth it. You just have to make it clear to yourself why.
Yeah. Well, I love that you talk about goals and purpose, or the why, because my why is different than our goal. I mean, our goal is to grow our audience and get new clients, right? But my purpose is, as I think I said earlier, to let women know they're not alone and to help them think outside of the box. So because I understand that, it helps me frame who I want as guests. So it helps make the decisions easier. So you're not just, being pitched by everyone. Because I was surprised how quickly people started reaching out, asking to be on our podcast. And, I think it's important to have a framework in place so that you can stay authentic with your podcast and talk about the important things. And and my sub reason for the podcast is, in business, you have to be certainly organized in a certain way with your marketing. And I have ideas out the wazoo, and I have a lot of creative genius. So I tell my team, the podcast is my sandbox to play in. Like, we can be organized over here, but I'm going to have whoever I want on the podcast, because I've definitely had marketing teams tell me, hey, we should schedule this. We should work it into the content. And I'm like, no, this is my sandbox I'm going to play in, and I'm just going to have whoever on I want that I feel is valuable to our audience. Like, I don't want a content calendar. I don't want all this other stuff that we have in the rest of the business. I just want it to be real and authentic. And I think the more you think it through like that, because, you have so many choices, and that's why like hiring, a management company like yours is so important, because they can walk you through these choices and help keep you aligned.
Definitely. And marketing your business with the help of your podcast is game changing. Yeah. For some of my clients who I do their marketing for them from their podcast, I can turn their 4-hour-long episodes, so 4 hours of content that they have to record, I can turn that into 200 pieces of content just through clips, through quote cards, through blog posts. There's a lot that you can do to repurpose your content. Not in a way that it's going to be like, oh, why is this podcast now a blog post and blah, blah, blah. It's all done strategically to work with your business and really focus on that omnipresence. And I think that's the word of 2024, yes. Omnipresence. Everyone wants to show up everywhere. And that's just because people are spreading out with, more platforms popping up, with more just availability online, and there's a lot of noise right now. There's a lot of noise on the internet, and so the more you show up and not contribute to the noise, really come above the noise, and you can definitely do that exactly through podcasting. I think that is a huge opportunity for businesses this year.
I love that you talk about that, because, in talking to marketing companies and marketers and different people, I'm like, oh, we want to be omnipresent. And they're like, huh? No, we should focus here. And I'm like, no, we want to be omnipresent. And it's like, you have to keep repeating that, because, one of our company's big goals is to impact 1 million women's lives. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that 1 million women hire me to coach or consult them, but maybe they're listening to this podcast and they hear a tip you give or another guest, and it can change their life and then change their daughter's life. And it's the ripple effect. And so when you're committed to something like that, the omnipresence makes sense, because it's not like, hey, I want to be famous. It's like, I want to be out there impacting people's lives. So I want to be everywhere I can be. So hopefully more women are listening, and they gain the wisdom from our guest, and they gain the wisdom from the conversations, or they know they're not alone. And so, I love that you say it's the word of 2024, because I feel that way too, but I have been getting a ton of pushback when I use that term. And I get it, because it's hard to do it. It's like, it's a hard battle for most people. So I think that you doing that for your clients is such a value add. I love it.
Yeah, and it helps them with their marketing, of course, just showing up more. I remember a couple years ago, I had a client who was focusing on this, and I was helping her with, and this was before the boom of video podcasting, so it was a little bit harder back then. But her goal that she always said was, I want people to see me on their screen so much they think I'm famous. I was like, okay, that's actually funny. I love that. And I think that taking that mentality into this, of course, you don't need to be famous, but you can show up so much that, there's so many coaches these days. There's so many people in all of our industries. And if you are willing to put in the time and the effort to show up more and show up better, then you will be able to be hired and get more clients and really share your value with more people.
Well, it keeps you from becoming commoditized, especially if you're good at doing it authentically and being real, because people want to know who they're working with. I think that right now, the world again is craving deep relationships in business and personal. And that wasn't the truth for a while. Like they were fine with commodity and paying less and etc. And I think right now, the world really wants connection. So the more you connect, the more real you are and vulnerable, I think it's going to be better. But we will see.
And we will see. And I think, going back to business as a whole, there's different buyer types. There's different people who will just jump on your offers. There's people who you need to nurture for longer before they'll buy from you. There's, you probably know this better than I do, but I believe there's 4 buyer types. And so understanding what type of buyers you have can really make a lot of sense when you start thinking about podcasting. Because if you have an audience who kind of like waits, nurture them. Nurture them. Social media is free, right? You can post for free every single day. And so you're not going to be able to post one time and get a client, right? That's just not how social media works. And like I said, it's free. So you really should be taking advantage of it.
Well, and the other thing is your clients aren't always engaging. Like, don't think because they're not engaging that they're not watching you, because they are watching and they're listening. And, I was shocked to find, like, I'll talk to someone and they're like, oh yeah, your Tuesday episode, blah, blah, blah. I listen every Tuesday and Thursday on the way to work. And it's like, oh, really? You do? And then, because one week we had a technical issue and the episode wasn't up, like, when we woke up. And I'm like, we have to fix this. People listen on the way to work. Like, it has to be there, right? Like, go fix it. But it's really, it's great because it's again, something they're getting value from and they've welcomed into their life, and you just never know how you're impacting someone's life. Awesome. All right. So if someone's new, they should give you a call, number 1, to help them. Number 2, think through their goals and purpose, right? And then what do you recommend as far as competitive analysis? And people probably don't think in those terms, but like, I remember I was directed to go look out there, see what, people in the genre, what their cover pages look like how they're showing up. And it was like, do I want to show up the same or do I want to show up different? It really just kind of helped decide like how we wanted to show up.
Yeah, I think that it never hurts, right? But I also will caveat that with, don't let it hold you back if you see people doing like, I have a lot of clients who are in similar spaces. I actually work with a lot of authors, surprisingly. A lot of authors who like write business or write books and then want to promote and connect with more authors. And so they are in similar spaces, but each of them has their own audience. And me, on the back end of things as their producer, I can see that. I can see that all 3 of these podcasts have huge followings. They all have different followings. Their audiences are interacting with them differently. One is very popular on YouTube. The other one is very much on audio. And another one focuses, on a mixture of both. But they all are getting listens because they all have different goals and different, values. So me being on the back end, I can see this, but they can't. And so I think about it from their point of view. Like, there's more podcasts popping up in similar industries now, and that might be concerning to them, right? They might think, and even one of them did come to me and she was like, she was like, do you ever feel like people are closing in on you? And I was like, they're not. And I can tell you this because they're not. Like, there is an audience for everyone. Yeah. There is an audience for every business, every podcast. You just have to be bold enough to put yourself out there and state your opinions, be bold in your branding, and show up more, and people will listen. And so competitive analysis is great. If you look and see, who are your competitors? How are they showing up online? But then put it into your own vision and just run with it, right? Put it into your own branding and just go with it. Because the longer you wait, and this is what I always hear, the longer you wait to start your podcast, the more you're going to regret it, because it does slow down your long-term growth, right?
Yeah.
If you start today, you're miles ahead of where you'll be than if you start 6 years or like 6 months from now, when you really feel ready or safe, or like you finally got past the competitors.
Also, you get better doing it. I know when we first started, I was like, okay, I'll record 3 episodes a day, because we had X number already, recorded, because I didn't know what my capacity was for recording. And, my episodes tend to run 45 to an hour when it's an interview, because, my producer will be like, oh my gosh, that could have gone for 3 hours. I'm like, I know, like the conversations are so great, right? I don't know if people are listening to all that time. I know it's more popular to have them shorter, but it's like, if I have a fascinating guest, I'm not going to like cut them off. We're going to go. So when I do my solo, I try to keep them like 25, 30. And then we have panels that always take an hour, because I have 3 fascinating guests. But it's, so now, like today I'm recording 6 episodes, 5 of my own and 1 guesting, but like I couldn't have done that at the beginning. Like I didn't have the stamina to do that many episodes, and it wasn't as easy for me. So it took more effort. So I agree, like get started, because you're going to build momentum and you're going to show up better as a host, like as you go, right? So it changes and it gets easier. No, it's funny. I got the report for our numbers last week, but honestly, I hadn't looked in months, because there was no question that I'm stopping my podcast, because I just love it so much. And like my guests always thank me and they love the experience. So I'm like, okay, this is a win-win. Like we're going to keep this going. So, yeah. So I'm just like, I don't
love
even
that.
Look. I should look but more.
I mean, it's cool because you have exactly what you want to do laid out, and you have your goal in place, and you are living true to the value that you want to offer in the podcast. And so as long as those things are all aligned, then the podcast numbers should keep growing, right? Yeah. If you keep telling women that they can do more things and they can be, whoever they want to be, then they're going to keep coming back. And I love to see the numbers just like continuously grow. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, more people are sharing it. More people are telling their friends about it. And, that is great advice that you share about being able to record 6 in one day, because you've put in the hours of practice. And that is a big piece that I see a lot of people struggle with in the beginning. They're like, what do I talk about? And I always say, lay out like 10 ideas right now. Yeah. What are your social media posts about? Dissect them more and make it into like 40 minutes to an hour. Or, I'm sure, this was true with me in the beginning. Solo episodes made me so nervous. I was like, what am I going to talk about for the next hour? And now and I talk all the time, April. I talk all the time. I never stop talking. So I don't know why it made me so nervous. But now my last solo episode, I think, was close to an hour long. And I was just talking about my journey.
Well, that's so funny, because at the beginning, when I first started solos, because we were doing panels and interviews. No, we started solos at the beginning. I was like, how do I talk for 30 to 45 minutes to myself without sounding like a narcissist? Like, I'm like, what? That was my fear, even though I was really talking to the audience. So yeah, my first solos were just explaining Vixen Gathering and then like our 5 pillars. And then I actually took what I do for a webinar, and I did like a coaching session on each of my webinars that I have created. So that helped, because I had a purpose. And I would have the slides up and nobody could see them, and I was just running it like I would run a webinar. So yeah, but that was my fear at the beginning. I'm like, how do you not sound like a narcissist when you're talking for 45 minutes straight?
Yeah. And when I first started, I could not do my solos on video, and now I can, because looking at myself and being like, I'm talking, like, it just made me so nervous. And so now I can. And video, I know we didn't get too into video, but I think that video is like the next big wave of podcasting. It's definitely what and I do have some audio only clients, but podcasting is truly turning to video so you can get the clips and you can get the content from it. And I just wanted to be sure we touched on that before,
please,
wrapping up, because I think it's so important. A lot of people are setting up their back. I'm in my apartment right now, right? Like, it's not the best background, but it's what works, and it still gives the same content to the listeners. It doesn't hurt anything. It only gives more value by turning on that video and being able to cut it up into clips and post it everywhere and spread your value around more.
Yeah, I love it. And, there's something nice about seeing someone's face. So I got big into watching things on YouTube, as most people did in, 2020 and stuff. So I saw plenty of shows where I'm like, okay, they're looking down, reading their notes, they're drinking. Like, it's not this big a deal. It's totally different. I mean, when I did TV, you literally for 12 hours had to sit like this with everything pulled, because you're seeing so much, and like it was like very formal and you have to present yourself a certain way. So it's like super fun to do podcasting, because it's like, if I want to take a sip of my water, I'm going to take a sip of my water. Like, people just see that you're a real person. So I think that's a good point. Well, Hayleigh, we are out of time, which I hate. I want to ask you 2 quick questions. And then maybe we'll do another episode on podcasting so we can go deeper. But questions I love to ask. Number 1 is, when do you feel the most feminine, like your feminine energy flowing?
I love that. So I think when I feel the most feminine is truly when I'm just having conversations with other women and just being able to talk about business, which can be masculine, right? We have to be in our masculine energy so much to be able to run a successful business. But just being able to like sit down with women like you, April, and just chat about the struggles of business or the beautiful things in business or how we got here. We didn't just wake up and we're successful. And I think that is just so fun to empower other women to continue doing that. And I think that is when I probably feel the most feminine.
I love it. Well, it's connection and communication, which are 2 parts of feminine energy. So it makes a ton of sense. No, I love it. That's awesome. So if you had to put a color to your feminine essence or energy, what color would it be?
I love pink. Pink is my favorite color. I'm usually wearing pink. My brand colors are not pink, so I don't usually wear them on interviews. But, I love just like, that would be the color, definitely pink.
I love it. That's beautiful. And then as we wrap up, what do you have going on right now? What should our guests know about you, or where can they find you? And by the way, if you're listening, you can always find our guest information at vixengathering.com/podcast. And if you have not subscribed, do it. And all of these cool resources we talk about, all of Hayleigh's information, how to connect with her, gets delivered to your inbox. So that's pretty cool. So if you haven't subscribed, do that so you don't have to search. But Hayleigh, if you'll share with our audience, and we'll put it in the show notes, the best way to find you, follow you, connect with you, and what you have going on now.
Yeah, absolutely. And April, just a quick question for you. When is this going to go live? Because I have a new offer coming up, so I just want to...
Good question. This is May. Let me get you the exact date. I think it's around May 16th this episode's going to launch.
Oh, my birthday is May 15th, so I love that.
Mine's May 1st. Cool. We're
oh my
Tauruses.
gosh,
May
Tauruses. Yes. Okay, perfect.
Love it.
So I have 2 ways that you can... Or I have 2 downloads that you can... Sorry, awesome. Let me start right now. So I have 2 things that you can really access right now, and both are really going to help you excel in your podcast journey. They're both free. One is a free podcast checklist. So if you are newer to the podcasting journey and you want to stop scrolling, that doom scroll of like, what do I need to do to start a podcast? You can go on my website right now under resources, and I have my free podcast checklist there. And if you have a podcast already or really want to propel your podcast journey forward, I have a free training that you can access immediately live that's called Leveraging Podcasting for Business Expansion, the 3 moves you need to know. You can find these both on my website under the resources tab. My website is espressopodcastproduction.com. And if you just want to come and chat with me, I am always on Instagram, literally always. My handle is Espresso Podcast Production, and I run my Instagram, so if you message me, you're talking to me directly. So come say hi. I love talking and connecting with other people.
I love that, Hayleigh. That's so awesome. Yeah, I run my Instagram too now. It's really fun connecting and chatting with everyone.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, Facebook, I find people to be chattier than Instagram for some reason. Like, they'll open up a little bit more, but I know it's different for everyone. So I love playing with that and seeing, like, okay, where are people and where are they going to communicate? So super fun. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. I could pick your brain all day about podcasting. I am going to go check out your free resources. And I know you and I talked about doing an audit soon, so I'm looking forward to that too. But thank you for today. Everyone listening, just remember, how are you going to show up in love today? The world needs more love. So how can you be more loving to everyone around you, but also to yourself? And Hayleigh, if you had a message for our audience, what would you like to share as we round up this hour?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I think we need to have more kindness to ourselves. I see this all the time in podcasting where people will record and be like, ew, I hate my voice, or ew, I hate the way I look on video. And no one cares, truly. Just give yourself kindness. You're more than just the way you sound or the way you look. There's more to you. And I just want everyone to remember that.
That's really beautiful and a lovely perspective. So thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing having you here today, Hayleigh. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. And for everyone listening, show up in love, be kind to yourself, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Have a great day.